Third listening. Part 1. Listen to the first part of the lecture again. As you listen, complete the notes in your books.
On the morning of April 10th, 1912, the Titanic set sail from England. 4 days later, she lay at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. On the evening of January 13th, 2012, the Costa Concordia set sail from Italy. A day later, the ship lay partly sunk off the coast of Italy. Reports of the sinking, or the partial sinking, of the Costa Concordia filled the newspapers, television, and the internet for days. Almost immediately, people began to compare the sinking of the Concordia with the sinking of the Titanic. There were a number of unusual similarities between the two events. However, there were also some major differences. I'll focus my talk today on pointing out some of those similarities and differences. Okay, what are some of the similarities between these two ships? Well, first of all, both the Titanic and the Costa Concordia were enormous. In fact, the Titanic was the largest ship of her day. She was 882 feet long with 9 decks. The Costa Concordia was a little larger than the Titanic at 951 feet long with 13 passenger decks. So both were, indeed, mega ships of their time. Today, even larger passenger ships are sailing the seas. Ships that are longer and higher and heavier, but that's a topic for another day. Where was I? Okay, so both ships were mega ships of their time. Also, both the Titanic and the Costa Concordia were luxury ships with pools, restaurants, a variety of activities, and places for the passengers to relax and enjoy their time on board. Let's see. Another similarity is that as each ship was sinking, there were acts of courage, and there were also acts of cowardice. Yes, the way some people acted was very brave. For example, a number of the men on board the Titanic gave up their seats in the lifeboats to women and children. The rule on the Titanic, as it was sinking, was women and children first. At the same time, there were some on the Titanic who acted like cowards. One man, for example, dressed as a woman so he could get into a lifeboat and save his own life.
Part 2. Now listen to the second part of the lecture and take your own notes.
Okay, so on the Costa Concordia, there were also acts of courage and acts of cowardice. At times, aboard the sinking Costa Concordia, it seemed to be every man for himself. In fact, the captain of the Concordia left his ship before all the passengers and crew were safely off. It's rather strange. The captain said he tripped in the dark and fell into a lifeboat. The Italian Coast Guard ordered him to return to his ship, but he refused to go back. Many people today still think the captain should be the last person to leave a sinking ship. As you probably know, the captain of the Titanic went down with his ship. The captain of the Costa Concordia left his ship and survived. All right, now I'd like to spend a few minutes pointing out some of the big differences between these two ship disasters. Oh, I guess I already touched on one difference. the fate of the two captains. So, let me continue. The Titanic was a transatlantic ocean liner, that is, a ship that provided transportation across the Atlantic Ocean. She, or it, sank in the deep, cold ocean waters. The Costa Concordia was a cruise ship that provided vacation tours around the Mediterranean Sea. The Concordia sank in warmer, shallow water near the coast. It, came to rest on her side with much of the ship above the water. Another difference between the two events is what caused these ships to sink. The Titanic struck an iceberg, while in contrast, the Costa Concordia struck a shelf of rocks near an island off the Italian coast. So, although the ships sank for a similar reason, they struck something underwater. They each struck something quite different. The Titanic, an iceberg. The Costa Concordia, rocks. But, of course, the greatest difference between these two terrible accidents was the number of lives lost. When the Titanic sank, more than 1,500 people died. They drowned or froze to death in the icy North Atlantic water. A few more than 700 people survived the sinking of the Titanic. In the Costa Concordia accident, 32 people lost their lives. 2 remained missing. Almost 4,200 people survived the disaster. One of the reasons that so many people on the Titanic died was that the ship carried only about half the number of lifeboats needed to rescue all the people on the ship. And most of those lifeboats weren't full when they left the Titanic. Many people never had a chance to be saved. In contrast, the Concordia had extra lifeboats, with room for 25% more people than the ship could hold. But because the ship was lying on its side, many of the lifeboats couldn't be lowered into the water. Oh, by the way, did you ever see the movie Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet? If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And speaking of the movie, a Swiss tourist aboard the Costa Concordia reported that the song from the movie, My Heart Will Go On, was playing in the dining room when the sound of the crash was heard by the diners. Isn't that strange? Why would they play that song on a ship? Alright, let me end by noting that whenever people travel for business or adventure on ships, trains, or planes, the possibility of disaster is always present. Most people arrive safely at their destination, but accidents like shipwrecks and train wrecks and plane crashes do happen. The Titanic and the Costa Concordia remind us that no matter how safe we are told to feel, accidents can happen suddenly and unexpectedly. You need to be on your toes when something happens. Remember, the vast majority of people do arrive safely at their destinations, whether they take a ship, plane, train, or, for that matter, a car. But not always. Well, that's it for today.
On the morning of April 10, 1912, the Titanic set sail from England. 4 days later, she lay at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. On the evening of January 13, 2012, the Costa Concordia set sail from Italy. A day later, the ship lay partly sunk off the coast of Italy. People began to compare the two events. There were similarities and differences. Similarities: both the Titanic and the Costa Concordia were enormous. The Titanic was 882 feet long, with 9 decks. The Costa Concordia were 951 feet long with 13 decks. Both were luxury ships with pools, restaurants, and relaxed activities. During each sinking, there were acts of courage and cowardice. On the Titanic, some men gave up seats for women and children. Others act selfishly. On the Concordia, some have orders, but many panic. The captain of Titanic went down with the ship. The captain of the Concordia left early, and he refused to return. Differences: the Titanic was an ocean liner crossing the Atlantic. It sank in deep, cold water. The Concordia was a cruise ship in the Mediterranean Sea. It sank in shallow, warmer water, lying on its side. The Titanic struck an iceberg. The Concordia hit rocks. Over 1,500 people died on the Titanic. Around 700 survived. On the Concordia, 32 died and about 4,200 survived. The Titanic had 2 few lifeboats. Many left half full. The Concordia had enough lifeboats, but many couldn't be lowered. A sweet tourist on the Concordia said, "My Heart Will Go On" was playing during the crash. These disasters remind us that accidents can happen anytime. Even with modern transport, most people arrive safely, but not always.